Meet Steve. He and his wife moved to Portugal a year and a half ago. We talk monthly budget.
What would you say would be a good budget for a couple to have monthly in their mind of this is about how much I need to budget to spend?
Inflation.
I don't want to say skyrocketed, but it has gone up pretty significantly. If anybody is concerned with the economics of Portugal, it's looking pretty good.
We discuss where he moved.
It is a little bit tougher in a city like Guimarães.
But it was a good place to land, easy to meet people.
Funny thing about Portugal is no matter who you talk to, wherever they come from is the greatest city.
So is Portugal still the right place to be?
I grew up in the United States. I don't know if I will ever move back.
Steve, thanks for joining me today. We're going to talk about Guimarães, being an expat there, why you decided to move from the States. So let's go ahead and back up. What state did you come from and why did you decide to move to Portugal? And sight unseen, right?
Yeah, sight unseen. So my wife and I moved here from Arizona. We'd been there 15 years. And we just decided that we wanted to do something else, move outside the US. We both work remote and we had this whole list of countries. And the criteria, was safety, healthcare, the culture, how friendly people are, the visa process, affordability. And it was these two that kind of rose to the top, and it was Portugal and Croatia.
Okay.
And we were well, Croatia's just so far out there. And we had never been to either country. And so we just decided on Portugal.
Okay, so you went through the whole visa process and moved here without ever coming to Portugal.
Had never been to Portugal.
Okay.
Not even once.
So when you did the visa, you said you were remote workers, but when you actually did the visa, you did the D7.
We did the D7, yeah. So we qualified for the D7, and that was quite a process.
Okay.
CEF, the immigration department, was very backed up at the time, and I don't know if they still are.
Oh, yes.
They're supposed to have 60 days, to evaluate your paperwork, and it took almost a year for us.
Yeah.
And at 8 months, we actually got denied.
Okay.
Because that was right at this time where they came out with a new visa, the D8 visa, which had different qualifications. So by the time they got to our paperwork, they said, no, they need to reapply for the D8. And at that point, we would have been totally out of luck. But we had hired an attorney, an immigration lawyer service, and I would highly recommend that because if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't be here. They sent a legal letter and it was 8 pages long. And long story short, they got us approved for the original D7 visa.
Okay, great. So this is always the conversation. Do I need a lawyer? Do I not? And maybe, you might not initially, but then you might want to get a lawyer to help with things like this, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's definitely a significant added cost, and you can certainly do the process without a lawyer. But in my experience, if something goes wrong, there's no one to help you because a lot of these people, we went to our final CEF appointment, they didn't speak any English.
Okay.
And they weren't, they don't care. They're not there
not
to
very
help
helpful,
you.
right?
Yeah. So our attorney was there and he kind of translated for us. That was a huge help.
Okay, so you say worth the money for sure.
Absolutely, 100%.
Okay. All right, so when you went through the visa process, because earlier we were talking about the accommodation side of things, because you landed and you're still in Guimarães. Why?
So yeah, we get that question a lot. A lot of people ask us why Guimarães. And so when we were in the States, we were looking for areas of Portugal to live, and we decided that the north was better for us as far as the weather, and it was more forested, and that's just kind of what we were drawn to. And so there was this city called Braga, which we had never heard of previously, and we said, you know what, that's probably a good place. And so we were looking for rentals, because you need a 12-month rental, and we couldn't find anything. And the realtors that we wanted to work with, or we tried to work with, weren't super helpful because we weren't there. And one day I was like, what about Airbnb? I wonder if they do long-term rentals and maybe we can make that work. And it turns out they do, but they're kind of hard to find. And so I was looking in that general area of Braga and this town, and I pronounced it like Guimarães or something totally wrong. And I found an Airbnb and the house itself was very nice. It was perfect. The price was good. And the owner spoke English very well. And so I sent her a message and she started communicating with me and she was super helpful, the nicest person. And that's one thing I'll say about Portugal. Out of all the European countries I've been to, the nicest people by far are here in Portugal.
Okay.
They're just huge heart. They'll help you with anything. But yeah, so she was able to work with us on the paperwork. And even though we didn't stay in her Airbnb for 12 months, she helped us out with that.
Yeah, so she gave you an actual lease to suffice for the visa process.
Yeah, to submit for the visa process.
That's great. That's so nice. So then you weren't there for 12 months, but you ended up finding a place.
Yeah, we were there for about 4 months.
Okay.
And Guimarães is consists of a lot of little suburban areas and then a city center. And the city center is right where we wanted to live. And we got lucky because we made some friends. and a couple was moving out of their apartment right in the city center, and we were like, we want your apartment.
We want it, yeah.
And so we went and saw it, and it was really nice, and it was perfect, and a lot of things just fell into place, and so we have that apartment now.
Yeah, it's really hard right now just because of the shortage of rentals and finding one that actually works for the visa, especially if you're not over here. So oftentimes we recommend a renter's agent because they can help you find something to get the visa. And then once you get over here, it's a little easier, right? You start making friends, you become aware of the city that you're living in, and then it's easier to maneuver things, right?
Yeah, and I will say, like, as far as my experience, the culture here, they appreciate in-person communication.
Yeah.
You know,
that's a nice way of putting it.
At least a phone call. Like, they don't respond to emails as well as maybe we're used to in the US, and certainly not text messages. It just doesn't work. So being there in person really works. And I want to add one more thing about the visa process, because technically you're not supposed to get here until you have your visa, until it's approved.
Okay.
We didn't
do that. Okay.
We left shortly after sending in our paperwork because we had the lawyer look at it and he was like, yeah, this looks great. It shouldn't be any problem. And so we left and we got here. And so we were like really concerned when we got denied. But just as a side note, you all should not do that.
Okay. I mean, like a lot of people do ask, like after you submit and you're waiting, you can come over here on like your normal 90-day tourist visa as an American. Like you're definitely allowed to do that. But then once you're approved, you've got to go back and get the sticker and all that stuff, and then have your entrance in as then with your visa. So, but it's like a tourist thing, really.
What we did was, so we weren't in the U.S. at the time it got approved, and they're like, okay, we need your passports. So we sent our passports back to my mom in Arizona, who then sent them to San Francisco, which was our visa office. They stamped them, sent them back to my mom. My mom sent them back to us, and then we had them, but we needed an entry stamp.
Yes.
So we just flew to the UK for a day.
Yeah. And then came back. This is not totally recommended.
Don't do it.
Yeah, it is a bit of a workaround. So if you want to know more about how that works and if it works for you, I do consultations. So you can book something with me so we can chat about your unique situation. But it's not always the best way of doing it. It's better to be in person when you get your passport back.
It's a better idea.
Yeah, in your home country, because you do have to apply in your home country. But you're not alone in doing that. There actually are a lot of people who are like, okay, I'll send it off and then I'll go over to Portugal. But sometimes it takes longer than expected, which can be a little stressful if you're about to overstay your 90 days of like your tourist visa in the EU.
It was scary, you know, sending your passport. Yes. It's like, well, now I don't have a passport. But I will say, if you do happen to do that, don't do that. If you do happen to do that, at least before you send your passport, get a notarized copy of your passport, because you can use that.
And then you could get into the U.S. Embassy if anything happens and claim that it's lost or something like that.
Exactly,
right?
yeah.
You had to. Okay, all right, well, that's really good advice just to give people some options. So you moved to Guimarães. Let's talk about how that is. You're in the city center now. How do you like it? Are you planning on staying for a while? Tell us about the city itself.
Guimarães is an amazing city. And the funny thing about Portugal is no matter who you talk to, wherever they come from is the greatest city that's ever been.
Yeah.
But they never talk bad about any other cities. So Guimarães is really, it's like a cultural gem. It was the first capital of Portugal. With roots all the way back to the 11th century. There's a medieval castle. There's all this cool stuff, and there's always something going on. That being said, I'm 40. And my wife is a little bit younger, and we want to like be in more of an upbeat, you know, vibrant, exciting atmosphere. So after about a year and a half in Guimarães, I think we want to move to something a little bit bigger.
Okay.
But I can't say enough nice things about Guimarães. Like the city center is amazing. It's like a quintessential medieval European town. It's awesome. But I think there's a lot of elderly people there. I think the young kids kind of grow up in high school, and then they move out, and maybe they move back to the city as they're getting older. So at least in our stage of life right now, we probably want something a little bit bigger.
Okay, but it was a good place to land? Easy to meet people?
I can't think of a better place to land.
Okay.
We got really lucky with meeting people because we were introduced to one American couple that have moved there, and she knows everybody like in the whole town.
Okay.
And it was great because she introduced us to so many people, and we have a great group of friends there, which makes it hard to move.
Yeah.
But other than that, if we didn't have those people, it is a little bit tougher in a city like Guimarães. English is definitely not as prominent as, say, Porto or Lisbon.
Okay, that's good to know. So how's your Portuguese going then?
Un poco.
Ooh, okay.
It's so embarrassing. I feel so bad because, as you move here and then you're here for like a month, 3 months, 6 months, in a town that's about 60,000 people know you, they recognize you, and they're like, oh yeah, that's an American couple. They've only been here like 6 months, whatever. And now it's been a year and a half. And now I think people are like,
come on now,
like,
you
you
should
don't know
like
how to say anything. So it is on our list.
Okay.
Because there was a question whether we were going to stay or move to another country. And recently we've decided to stay in Portugal. So now I think we really have to.
Now it's time, yeah.
It's time.
But you can get by without it in Guimarães, even a smaller
You can,
town.
yeah. I mean, anywhere you go, the younger kids are learning English in school. It's required. So at some point, you're going to run into people that do speak some English, and you can get by. And I mean, we've learned enough words to where we can kind of figure out what we need.
All right, good. So you're looking at other places, something that's bigger. Where have you looked and where have you liked or not liked in the region if you're going to stay in the north?
Yeah, so we've really traveled most of Portugal.
Okay.
And we've decided the only place that we would move is Porto.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yay.
I know, right?
Yeah.
There's a reason why
yeah.
you guys are here.
Definitely. So why is Porto then for you now?
Porto is, and I'm talking like globally, anywhere I've been internationally, is one of the coolest cities I've ever been to.
Cool.
I mean, it's just, the history is amazing, the look and feel. I love San Francisco, and if anybody's been to San Francisco, if you walk into Porto for the first time, for me, I got huge San Francisco vibes.
Okay.
Just, it's on the water, it's hilly, like, certain buildings look similar. So it just felt comfortable to me, and it's just such an amazing city. We come here pretty often just to hang out and have fun.
Yeah. So now you want to move here.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So what other places did you check out around Portugal since you traveled a bit, and tell us about those?
Yeah. Certainly we've been to Lisbon. Lisbon's a big city. It's the biggest city, quite a bit bigger than Porto, but I didn't love it. It just kind of had like a big city vibe to me, which wasn't anything special compared to Porto, at least. We've been to some areas like Évora is a really interesting area. They have this like chapel of bones.
Yeah.
The Bone Church.
Yep,
Have you been there?
We have.
It's,
It's a little weird.
It's creepy,
Yeah.
but it's worth seeing. And we've been to like Jerez, the National Forest, which is not too far from here, which is super nice. Caminha, which is up north near Spain. We haven't been south, like the Algarve area.
Okay.
But like Cascais, and if we weren't moving to Porto and like money wasn't a problem, like Cascais or Sintra are like so amazing.
Yeah.
Really cool places.
But you've ruled out Algarve, like just knowing that it's probably not your scene with maybe like the different cities.
It's
weather.
It's hot and dry.
Yeah.
Which, moving from Arizona, that was like the last thing that we wanted. So maybe depending on where you're moving from, like if you live in Oregon, maybe you want something like that.
Yeah.
But for us, we didn't want hot and dry, and it's very seasonal as far as tourists go there, and it can get like super crowded from what we've heard. One of our friends in our group in Guimarães lived in the Algarve for 5 years, and she couldn't take it anymore.
Okay.
Like
yeah.
the summers,
too much.
yeah, it was just so. I don't know. It's so far from here. We don't have a car, so you take a train.
Yeah.
And it's 8 hours.
Okay, so if you're staying up in the north, how about Braga? Braga's a popular place that it's a place that people are looking into.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know what? You don't know what you don't know. And so when we were back in the U.S., Braga was like the place. We're like, ooh, looking at pictures, and I was like, yeah, this place looks great. And so we went to Braga just a few weeks after we got to Portugal, and we weren't impressed.
Okay.
It didn't do anything for me. I think my wife likes it a little bit more than I do, but even so, like it didn't have anything that really drew us back there.
Yeah.
So we're kind of happy that we didn't end up there.
Ruled it out because you initially were looking there as the place to go, but couldn't find a rental for the visa, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I love the honesty though. I mean, because sometimes I think you talk to people and they just kind of beat around the bush a little bit, but if you didn't like it, you didn't like it. Nothing's wrong with that. And you're not talking crap about it or anything. It just didn't fit what you were looking for, right?
Yeah. I'm pretty honest when it comes to that stuff. Sometimes it's a negative, but hey, you always know where I stand on things.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, so let's chat a little bit more about Guimarães for people who are interested in it. It's got maybe a slower pace of life in the sense that it's an older population, especially in the city center, but you said there's a lot going on. So they have festivals and stuff. Is there a big nightlife there?
So we live, the main church in the city center, it's called the Tyrrell, like the main city area, has bells. And you know, in Europe, bells are a thing. But I swear that this particular church and these bells go off like every 10 minutes. I don't know why. And we live so close to it that you can certainly hear it every time. And they're like random times, and they're like celebrating things, and there's fireworks everywhere. Like every day there's fireworks around Guimarães.
Really?
I don't know why.
Okay.
Never been able to figure that out. But yeah, there is always something going on. It's either a holiday, there's like a city festival. There's a lot of cultural festivals because it was like the birthplace of Portugal.
Yeah.
Which they will be happy to remind you of.
Okay, so they talk about that a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But yeah, and like I said, I think if I was in a different stage of life, maybe a little bit older, didn't have work to do and that sort of stuff, it'd be a perfect place.
Okay. So it works for some people, but not for everyone.
Yeah.
Which is great, like a great way to think about it.
Yeah.
What's the weather like there?
It's very similar to here. It can get hot in the summer. It can get humid. And living in the city center, I will say, is unique because it's all stone.
Okay.
It's all granite.
Yeah.
We're lucky enough in our apartment to have air conditioning. Most people don't. And I can't imagine a summer there in the city center without air conditioning.
Okay, so it would just get way too hot.
Hot and humid.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then what about in the winter? Does it get cold? Especially
If we're talking Fahrenheit, which I can only do
That's fine.
in my brain, it probably gets into like the high 30s is the lowest it would get usually.
Yeah.
But it's usually warmer than that. It's usually in the 40s. But again, the problem is with the stone, it gets cold at night.
Yeah.
And it stays cold because it gets damp.
Yeah, just holds it in there, right?
It holds it in there, and that's the other thing, like mold, there's not in our apartment, but there is some issues with mold in like the city center. Any house that's built of granite, because it's porous, and it just soaks up all that moisture. So
and then older too, right? I mean, that's a big thing.
Yeah.
Everywhere around here, if it's an older building anyway, even if if an apartment inside has been fixed, but the building's so old, then there's just other issues right behind the walls and stuff that can happen.
Yeah, it's a unique experience living in an older place because like in Guimarães, there's some areas that have not been renovated, and so you still see just like the outsides of an old building, and you see how they're constructed, and then you're like, is this safe?
Where's the
do they
code
have
on
building
this?
codes?
Yeah.
Do they check this every year? But so far so good,
Nothing's crumbled.
So no, Lisbon had a big earthquake in like 1700, but since then nothing.
Yeah.
So we're good.
Yeah. And I think
we're
even
good.
from that earthquake, they learned a lot. And I mean, they did start making more codes for, a lot more recent as well to help with that stuff. But unfortunately, sometimes it has to have you have to have a disaster before you figure out this didn't work. So yeah. But okay, so good to know. So let's see. You said that you're a remote worker. You and your wife are remote workers, so you can make your own hours. Are either of you beholden to certain hours in the U.S. with a company, or you just work whenever you want?
No, I work whenever I want. I'm a content creator on social media.
Great.
So I kind of
just do it whenever.
Run my own
Tell us
show.
about it.
ScubesKitchen.
ScubesKitchen. What do you do?
Total accident that I'm wearing this, by the way. What a coincidence.
Yeah, interesting.
I make comedy videos. I'm a little bit of a restaurant comedian.
Okay.
So a lot of my industry experience was in restaurants for like 12 years. And so I create characters that dress up and reenact scenarios of like funny things you hear in restaurants. But what's interesting is the international crowd doesn't really get it because these are very like American specific restaurant things. And especially I grew up in Southern California, so like Orange County area. You have a lot of weird people that ask for weird stuff in restaurants. So I make fun of these people. No offense to anybody, it's all just jokes.
Okay, so the channel's called ScubesKitchen.
ScubesKitchen.
So you can laugh on there, go over there and check it out after the interview, of course. So fun. So you can do that. So you have to set up and you have space at your place in Guimarães to be able to record and everything.
Yeah, I do. I have a little studio, little green screen.
Yeah, so that reminds me actually. Then how big is your place?
Our place, I think, is 900 square feet.
Okay.
So it's a one bedroom with a loft.
All right.
Which works for us right now, but again, part of moving is I think we want a little bit more space.
Okay, but then you're moving to Porto, so maybe the prices will go up.
The prices will definitely go up. Yeah.
So have you seen prices going up in Guimarães recently in this past year or so? Yeah, so even there.
My God, I even with groceries and everyday things, it's I don't want to say skyrocketed, but it has gone up pretty significantly. And if you didn't know this, the reason wine is so inexpensive in Portugal is because it's not taxed very much. At least it was. I think it's on cigarettes or tobacco and alcohol. Crazy.
That's going to be tough, like for restaurants, though. I mean, they're going to have to increase their prices for wine and such.
Yeah, who knows what's going to happen? But that's another thing. Moving from the U.S., you're used to price increases, but it's incremental, right? It's like 5% here, a couple percent here. In Europe, a lot of countries, because they're more socialized, right? You pay more taxes, but you get more things in return. But those taxes can be increased quite significantly sometimes.
Yeah, kind of takes you back, right? They're just like, we're just going to do this, and then it goes up rather than it being slowly. It's just like, boom, there it is.
Yeah, but overall, I mean, if anybody is concerned with like the economics of Portugal, I read about this. I'm sure you guys do too. It's looking pretty good.
Good.
It's in good shape. I mean, it's a stable country for sure.
That's good to know. So, I mean, and stuff for the longest time was fairly cheap. So there's a lot of room for growth, right? Like, so as prices do go up, keeping in perspective, it's not getting super crazy. For example, to get a glass of wine, if it goes up, maybe it's going to go from like €1 to €2, which is a big jump if you think about how much that goes up percentage-wise. But it's still quite affordable, right?
It is, and for us, if you're moving from the U.S. or the U.K., you're used to higher salaries, so it's less of an impact versus the local population here, who don't make very much per month. But yeah, I mean, overall, if you compare Portugal to surrounding countries, it is less expensive.
Yes. Okay, so then cost of living, you've seen it go up. What would be a couple living either in Guimarães or maybe Porto would be a little higher, but let's say in Guimarães, what would you say would be a good budget for a couple to have monthly in their mind of this is about how much I need to budget to spend?
Probably to be on the safe side. I mean, if you put aside $2,000 per month, you would live very comfortably.
Okay, that's good to know.
Very comfortable.
And just a nice lifestyle of going out, being able to do what you want to do, maybe a little bit of travel too?
A little bit of travel, and travel's much easier once you're over here. It's easier to get from A to B to C. And we don't have a car, so that is an expense that I didn't add in there.
Okay.
But it depends on your lifestyle. We live in the city center, and we don't really need a car.
Right.
You can walk everywhere you need to walk. The trains work fine. Uber works great.
Yeah, and still very affordable pricing, especially compared to the rest of Europe, like Uber and Bolt. To get one of those cars is a lot more affordable than other
Uber
European.
is very affordable, yeah. And even renting a car is affordable. I mean, there's some discount sites that I use that it's less than $20 a day.
Yeah, that's nice. And if
really
you
nice.
time it as well, like if you don't do it like off peak, it can be super affordable as well. Yeah.
Yeah, they make it a little easier to afford those types of things.
That's nice. Yeah. Well, at Expats Everywhere, we believe that living abroad transforms lives. So how has it transformed your life?
Oh man, in every way possible, really. Here's how it's transformed my life. I grew up in the United States. I love the United States. I always will, right? It's my home country. I don't know if I will ever move back.
Okay.
I mean, there's pros and cons to each culture, European and American culture. And for me personally and my wife, we fit in better to the European culture and way of living. It's just a little slower pace. There's different priorities, right? And it works better for us. So it's been a great experience for me. We didn't know what to expect, and we'll be here for the foreseeable future.
Awesome. Well, if you want to know more about Guimarães, then check out this city guide right here, and don't forget to subscribe. Now let's get moving.